What's up, guys? This is Surly Mechanic. On this episode 13 of Storytime with Surly, I talk about how I became a mechanic, my first automotive job. About 20 years ago, at the time I was living in Virginia, about 20 years ago, checking this truck over, we had a hurricane come through the area of Virginia I was living in. And at the time, I had worked for I guess technically not my first mechanic or automotive-esque job, but my first one at a dealership around other mechanics. I was working at an 18-wheeler place on Military Highway in Chesapeake, and it was called Everett Express. I'm not sure if it's still there or not. That was my first introduction into maintenance and mechanics and fixing the forklift and unloading trucks and fixing trailers and changing tires and all that good stuff. Anyway, the one that I count as my first real wanting to rain. We had a hurricane come through, and I was going around to people's houses and knocking on doors saying, hey, $20, I'll clean all these limbs and stuff up out of your yard, put them on the curb for you. Cool. So I hustled up and did that. Well, the gentleman that lived across the street from my dad, from us rather, because I was on my last year of high school, I believe. His name was John, and lifelong mechanic as well. He's the one that warned me not to get into it, make it a hobby, don't make it a career, but here we are. His wife, I guess he also, but his wife had worked at the dealership there in Chesapeake, and she was working at the Chevy dealership. Well, she recommended me for a job at the Acura dealership down the street, which they were working on acquiring at the time. So it was called Riddle Acura, and now it's called Priority Acura, and as far as I'm concerned, I think it's still Priority Acura, Priority Imports of Greenbrier or something like that. Anyway, so I started there as in the detail department, and hand in hand with that, I'd also work in a mechanic shop, doing oil changes and helping with warranty stuff that I was capable of doing before moving into parts for several years. Which, hindsight being what it was, that probably wasn't my best option, but it was more money at the time, so I jumped on it. So that was, between those two, it's a toss-up between Everett Express and Priority Acura. But there are experiences there that I would not trade for anything. Now, granted, at the time, and some people may be able to attest to this, and some people maybe not, young men have a desire to fit in, and this could be the case for women too. I'm not a woman, so I can't say. We have a desire to fit in, so sometimes we'll make a pathological habit out of, oh yeah, me too, when you have no idea what you're doing, or you have no idea about this sort of thing. If I could take anything back, it would be that, because there were several things that I made up that I shouldn't have. And that's something I try to instill in my children now, is that don't make up stuff. Like, be truthful and honorable and be yourself. Don't try to be what you think everybody else would think you're cool as being. Like, be yourself. That's 100%. If I could take anything back away from those experiences working for those places, maybe not so much Everett Express, but definitely the dealership, where I spent a lot of time with these guys and learned a lot of things from them about being a hard worker, about being a man, about honoring what you're gonna, what you what you say and what you stand by. Um, Now, I find it funny that oftentimes I get more flack from being truthful than I do as if I danced around the truth. That's something I'm not going to do for anybody, is dance around the truth. And I'm not going to make things up just to fit in with you. Like if you're telling me a story about this time that you fought Union soldiers in the Civil War, or you fought rebel soldiers in the Civil War and made a life raft out of rattlesnakes, I'm just gonna go, yeah, that's cool. Like, great, man. I wasn't there. I don't know. That's like telling funny stories is a joke. That's cool, but saying stuff just to try to fit in with the situation, that's not cool. Just be yourself. Like we had a guy, the lead technician was a bracket racer. And in bracket racing, there was a lot of times when I'd help him out. He'd go win money on the weekends. I'd never driven down a racetrack before. My mechanical experiences were limited to the stuff that I saw my dad and my grandfather do. So I had that to base conversations off of. And then like stuff my Uncle Charles did. But never anything concrete that I would be like, yeah, I did this. Which is why I'm telling these stories now. Because everything that you hear from here, and I've said this before, is, to my knowledge, 100% true, with a little bit of embellishment just for humor, and then leaving some information out just to protect anybody whose name I don't need to be throwing in there. Because there will be some stories that'll be like, wow, you actually witnessed somebody do that, nothing dangerous, but just more or less like, vehicular craziness, mechanical craziness, riding around in boats on the river. Nothing inherently dangerous is what I'm talking about. Not quite as dangerous as standing out in the lightning right now. But that is I enjoy those memories, and I've reached out to a couple of the guys a few times, and when I left there it was very sudden and abrupt, and that's something that I have not done since. I've only ever had a handful of jobs in my life because I don't just run. I try to make the best of a situation because it's more of a headache sometimes to turn and run. But I pretty much left a note and my keys to the dealership on my boss's desk and said, consider this my resignation, I quit. Now these guys, I considered them friends, very good friends, and I should have handled that situation differently. Taking the time to properly execute my departure. But we live and we learn. Another thing I want to stress to my children down the road is don't let anyone pressure you into doing something because they feel you need to. And that includes me and your mother. You do what you feel is right. That's not to say that I'm not. Well, see, I'm pretty open. I'll tell my kids this is how I feel about this, whether they do it or not. In the grand scheme of things, whether they do it down the road or not, is completely 100% up to them. But just like anything else, learn from your experiences. I had some fun at that dealership. Here's a little sub story. So the guy that owned the dealership, or was a co-owner, I guess, in conjunction with the new acquisition with Priority Auto Group, he might have been somebody that facilitated the deal. We used to house wholesale cars in the back to be shipped off to auction. Well, I was helping, I don't know, my buddy Graham. I'm not going to say his last name because he went to school for broadcasting, something like that. He was a lot attendant at the time, and I was helping him move cars that the guys were bringing in from auction, and one of them was like a mid-90s Corvette, and I let loose in the back parking lot and started doing donuts. I'm blowing smoke everywhere, and this is, it's wintertime, so the sun was already down. It's like 5:30, 5:45, and I'm thinking nobody else is there. I get about 6 or 7 donuts in, and I see him waving his hands to stop. So I came to a stop, let the smoke clear, and the GM, who was also managing partner or part owner, however that situation was set up, was standing there, and this guy was every bit of like 6'10". Like, he's a good foot or more taller than me, and standing there with his arms crossed, and he had this scowl. He used to be a police officer. He's big dude, like muscly dude. He worked out daily. Gucci loafers and thousands of dollars in his suits and all this, that, and the other. And he looks at me, and he had this mustache. He kind of looked like Jonah Jameson. I guess that's his name from Spider-Man, the original comic book. Anyway, he's standing there looking at me, and I put the window down, and he's like, "What do you think you're doing?" I said, "I was just making sure this Corvette was good to go for the auction." And he started laughing and said, "Go put the car up and don't let me catch you doing that again." Now today, you do something like that, you're fired. There's a lawsuit on the way. You're gonna have to come back and pressure wash my concrete. I want $5,000 for post-traumatic stress from the guy watching on the camera. Like, it's a different world today. It is a different world today. But that's it for episode 13. I've got to get back to work. I've got a Porsche Eaton Ford EcoBoost in here, a Ford Fusion I'm finishing brakes on that I got to go test drive, and then, as per the usual, there's a Dodge on the rack. So y'all stay tuned. We appreciate you watching. I appreciate you watching. To Peyton, Lillian, and Timothy, love you guys. Always do the right thing. I'll see y'all later.